Gosh, we have a few speakers with us tonight, and we're really lucky to have them all. You're going to hear from me a little more than usual this evening. I'll start us off, and then we'll be hearing from Lieutenant Erik Egide. He's with the California Highway Patrol's Marin area office. He's an 18-year California Highway Patrol veteran. He served as an officer in Marin, a sergeant in Santa Rosa and Marin, and a commander of the Quincy and Truckee offices, and he's currently second in command at CHP Marin. Also joined tonight by Ada Perlson. Ada's a TAM High senior. She's a Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships Youth Ambassador. And not only do I always find her insightful, but I walk away always feeling hopeful when I hear her speak. And I think there is so much to be hopeful about. As much as we're going to talk about hard stuff tonight, there's so much to be hopeful about for our young people. And so I love that Ada's here with us. You'll also hear from my colleague, Amanda Sheeran at MHIP, and she's going to close out our evening by sharing MHIP resources that help you take the next step this evening and how to bring these conversations into your homes with your kids, okay? So with that, I'm going to share some slides with you. Oh, I'm going to turn this actually starting with all of you. Your parents, community members, I'm sure your kids are talking. I'm sure your neighbors are talking. What do you know about what teen partying looks like in Marin County? What have you heard? What do you know? What is that scene? I mentioned I'm going to ask for some chat participation tonight. There's a lot of us here, so I'm hoping we have some folks who can lean into that and let us know what it is that they've heard or seen about that landscape. Okay, so not only beer, but stealing beer. Lots of drinking. Yep. Parties in open spaces. Yeah, there's been some notorious ones that have made the news on that. This comment about everyone's vaping and everyone's drinking, that's really important. We'll touch on that tonight. Fake ID, presence of other drugs, not just alcohol. Lack of parents, absolutely. So no adult supervision and parents supporting parties. Yeah, okay. House parties, yep. Thank you to those of you who have dived in, parents providing alcohol at parties as well. Yeah, so this is the landscape that we're dealing with. A lot of the same alcohol or drugs that you might have dealt with as young people, but a lot of new ones and a lot of adult permissiveness. So major issues around the parties. One is access, right? So some of you have mentioned whether that's stealing from the Safeway or getting it from adults. There's a lot of access to alcohol, there's access to vaping, there's access to cannabis products. We know this is an issue in Marin. We also know that at many, but not all, of our parties, affluence is actually a thread here, especially when we talk about adult support of parties. We've heard of coordination of rides, vans, buses. Some of you may remember the Larkspur Party Bus in 2015, where a kid rented a bus for about $1,000, right? So this plays in. What I want to flag that's different than the parties of any of our youth is that there's a whole new array of more potent and newer substances, okay? So cannabis is not the same cannabis that it was when you were in high school, right? We're dealing now with methods of using drugs like vaping and others that can cause different risks. And we're dealing with newer substances. We're dealing with fentanyl pressed into pills, things that have very serious and immediate repercussions, right? And many of you tonight in that chat already have talked about a culture of adult knowing or permissiveness or norming or just sort of turning the other eye. And we know that's really perpetuated an issue. And we know that's why a lot of you are here tonight. Okay. So this is the landscape that we're looking at. Our goal tonight is to acknowledge that this is actually a really tricky landscape. And in part, we've all created that landscape for our kids, and it's our job now to support them in navigating it. It's not bad behavior. It's a product of an environment that they're in, and some really unique things about Marin, honestly. And our goal is how do we support our kids to navigate this? And we're hoping that tonight we can help you with some of that. So, two questions usually come up when we're talking about teens and parties with parents. One is, what if my kid wants to throw a party with substances? And the other is, what if my kid wants to go to the party with substances? And of course, they're related, but I want to tackle the first question first. What if my kid wants to throw in my home a party? What if they're saying, Mom, Dad, there need to be substances or nobody will come? This is what every other house is doing, right? And we're starting here because we have enough research and evidence and actually laws to give a pretty straightforward answer on this one. Whereas our second question gets a little harder and a little murkier. But that first question, clear evidence, and you're in control of the answer, okay? I want to validate how easy it is to think that if we are hosting young people, whether it's a large party or a small cluster of kids in our house and allowing use, how easy it is to think we're keeping them safe. Okay. I think anyone who's here tonight is here because they want their kids to be safe and healthy, right? And so if this is something that you've thought in the past or something you've supported, no judgment. No judgment at all. These are really thoughts that have been perpetuated. They're deep in the culture, but they're also not true. So when we say, well, they're going to drink anyways, safer that they do so at home. Or, you know what? It's better that they learn how to use safely at home now, right? Or even this idea that every home in Marin is allowing this, right? These are all very much myths. And we know enough now to know that, in fact, while we're trying to keep our kids safe, if these are our actions, we know that the research says that teens who are allowed to drink alcohol or use with adult supervision in the home are actually more likely to engage in harmful behavior later, whether that's drinking more frequently or binge drinking or even drinking and driving, right? So one of the thoughts is, well, the kids are at home, so at least they're not going to drive. But what we know is our research is telling us that in long term, they are going to drive, and it's much more likely that they will. Um, I had a friend recently say to me, well, what about in France, right? What about in Europe? What about in these other cultures where in our stereotype, there's more permissiveness and they turn out just fine? The research is the same in France, guys. I looked it up today, and in fact, binge drinking among teens is very much on the rise, just as much as here, if not more. So this is a cross-cultural phenomenon, and the research is really clear that when we let kids use in our homes, we are causing harm. We're not keeping them safe. We also know that age of a first drink really matters, or age of first use really matters. We're not just talking about health and safety tonight. We're not just talking about driving, although we will talk about that a lot tonight. We're also talking about setting kids up for lifelong behaviors. And we know that the earlier kids start to use, the more likely it is that they become dependent on substances as adults. It's a really clear linear line there. So we always say delay, delay, delay. The more we can delay, the better it is. And the information that we give tonight may be used differently by different families here for various reasons, partially based upon the age of their kids. And that's okay. You're going to take this info and you're going to do with it with what you want to do. Oh, we have somebody who is French who commented. Thank you. I appreciate that, Christelle. Okay. We also know what we don't know about other kids. And this is really important because when we let other kids drink in our homes, or use cannabis in our homes or anything else in our homes, there's a whole slate of things that we don't know about those kids. We don't know what access or norms are like in their home. We don't know if they have underlying mental health conditions that are going to exacerbate or be exacerbated by substances. We don't know if they're taking prescription medications that are going to have a very harmful and consequential interaction with whatever they're using in our homes. We don't know that there's a family history of dependency and if they're maybe more prone to dependency and addiction than my kid, right? And we just don't know what substances they're using. We might think it's just a beer. I say just because beer has plenty of harms, but right, that's our mindset. And the reality is kids are using far more diverse substances, and we actually don't know what's making its way into our homes. So all these things we don't know about other kids. And when we have substances in our home, what are we exposing those other kids to, right? I'm gonna ask you to maybe humor me a little bit here, but I was thinking very deeply the other day about the first slumber parties that my kids had, like age 8 or so, 3rd grade, and thinking about the responsibilities I had for other children in my care during those parties. And I'm going to ask you to think back to that. If your kid had slumber parties, if not, then play dates. What were you responsible for? Were you responsible for feeding them? Did you have to put a band-aid on a scratched knee? I have had to sit on a couch in the middle of the night next to an 8-year-old who had a nightmare while she fell back asleep, while my child slept peacefully on the other side of the room. But when those kids are in our care, they are in our care, right? We are so responsible for them and their well being. And something switches sometimes in our minds as parents where we think that because they're a little bit older, we're no longer responsible for them. But I am still responsible for that 8-year-old when she comes back into my house as a 16-year-old, right? Um, she is still a kid making decisions with the emotional and impulsive part of her brain. She is still a kid who just really wants a snack and is going into my pantry, right? And she's still a kid who needs adult support and supervision. And this sort of parental sense of being responsible for other kids is actually backed up by law in Marin County. And I want everybody to walk away tonight really clear on those laws, social host ordinances, okay? These are ordinances throughout Marin County that tell us as parents that indeed we are responsible for the well-being of other minors in our care, right, when it comes to substances. This means that we as adults, as parents, are responsible for any gatherings on our property where minors are using any sort of substance. It means we're responsible even if we're not home, okay? These ordinances actually came out of a tragedy that occurred after a house party as kids were driving home from a party in Nevada in 2005, and there was a crash where 2 teenage boys were killed. And in the wake of that, um, one by one, our municipalities in Marin County passed these ordinances. They vary by municipality, but everywhere in Marin has an ordinance that holds adults responsible for the minor substance use in their home. Okay. Consequences vary. They can be a fine, it's a civil charge, or it could be criminal, which is a misdemeanor, which might stay on someone's record. Okay. And these ordinances are important. They're not just there to catch parents out, they're not there to gather fees. They're there to remind us that we are responsible for other kiddos on our property and to remind us to take on that responsibility as parents and caregivers. Okay. So tonight, I want to put out the call that we really do matter as parents. You all really matter. You matter to your kids. I know that's why most of you are here tonight, but you also really matter to other people's kids. And on this first question of hosting a party in your own home with substances, The law is really clear, the research is really clear, and at least for me, my intuitive parenting heart, right, is really clear, that we just can't do that. And you kind of imagine the number of people who are in this Zoom call, 208 parents here. And if 208 parents decided that they weren't going to host parties or gatherings with substances in their house, how that starts to change the norm and the culture, that makes it really hard for our kids to navigate this situation, right? There's a second question that comes up, and that's, what if my kid wants to go to a party where substances are present? And I don't have quite as crystal clear an answer for you as I do on the first, because this is really going to vary. It's going to vary depending upon your family, your relationship with your kids, your preferences. Um, but we do know that whether or not you allow that, the guidance on parenting approach from the research is the same, that we can still be sort of our best parent selves and do our best to help our support our kids and keep our kids safe and healthy, regardless of whether that's a yes or a no for your family. And so I'm going to take us through some of that information and research um, that helps us guide what we're doing. When we say, there's a question of, when we say minors, does that mean 18 or 21? My understanding of the ordinances is it's under 18, but I'm very open to somebody who might know better or differently in changing, correcting me. Okay, 18 and under. So before I go into some of the research, I want to ground us in a few things. One, I've mentioned before, we know enough about substances now that we don't need to label this as bad behavior anymore. We don't need to label that for kids, and we don't need to label that for adults who have kids who use substances, right? It's not bad behavior. We can do all the things the right way. We still have challenges. We're human. This is not a failure on any of our parts, okay? This is actually really hard stuff, and I want to validate how hard it is. So let's talk about parenting. Strict parents raise sneaky kids. This was said by a Marin 12th grader, the daughter of a friend of mine, quite recently, actually. And it gave me a lot of pause, right? I'm sort of steeped in the research on parenting, and strict parents raise sneaky kids. This was in relation to a friend whose parents were very strict, and their daughter had gone to great lengths to evade them and had gotten into a dangerous situation. And I think for a lot of us, this is what we don't want. And so we end up maybe being overly permissive, because then our kids at least won't be sneaky and won't get into a dangerous situation, right? And and this makes perfect sense, except I want to draw a really clear distinction for us tonight between strict and structured. Okay. And what this young person meant when she said strict parents, and what the research tells us about being a structured parent, which is a bit different. Okay. Strict is rigid rules, rigid consequences. It is not two-way conversation. Um, it's not a lot of listening, and it isn't supported by high degrees of warmth or care. It's just because I said so. No, because I said so. I caught myself the other day saying to my own kids, no, because I said so, and very quickly caught myself, because that doesn't work. No, because I said so doesn't work. Structured is something really different. When we're structured parents, which is also called authoritative, if we look at sort of some of the parenting research, it means that we're able to hold two things at once. We're able to provide structure and limits. We do use consequences, not to be punitive, but because it's a tool for learning, right? But we also have a high degree of warmth and support. We also allow for age-appropriate autonomy, right? We also reason and hold conversations with our kids about the decisions we're making. And so we're able to hold at the same time these high expectations and structure and boundaries, and we're also able to hold support and care. All the information and intel we have says this is the sweet spot. It also says it's the hardest and takes the most patience to do, but that this holding both at the same time, structure and support, is what gives best outcomes for kiddos, and best outcomes around substance use and party behaviors as well. Okay. Um, so I'm going to dive into just a little bit briefly of that research. I am going to ask for not just research, but the human lens from you all in the chat on some of your experiences, your tried and true tips and tricks. If something's worked for you and your family, we want to know about it and we want to learn from you as well. But I want you to know that underscoring all of these is the idea that relationship really matters, that it depends on having existing trust, existing warmth, existing communication with your kiddos, in order to parent really effectively around this. If you're not in that place with your kids, there are folks out there who can help with that, right? There are coaches, there are therapists, there are people who can work on forming that connection. But that connection is really important when we talk about parenting kids around parties and them actually listening to us, right? I love that we have research on support. I love that we can look and say that anything that we do that our kids perceive as us supporting them and accepting them and loving them is actually really important, and it lowers teen substance use, particularly for high school students, which for me is the most interesting part because they've reached this age where we tend to think, oh, they're independent, they need me less. But no, they need you just as much. It might have a different feel to it, but those high school students are still needing your support, your warmth, your acceptance, and that is translating over to behaviors they have around substance use, around parties as well. Boundaries. It's really, really clear that our teens who say that there are rules in their house against underage drinking are actually less likely to attend parties. And if they do attend those parties, they're less likely to drink at them. Okay. When a teen perceives that this is not something their parent would approve of, they actually have lower odds of using that substance in the past month. This is true for tobacco, for alcohol, and for cannabis. But we also know, again, this strict versus structure, that just saying zero tolerance and leaving it at that.
Jackie, can you say that again if you don't?
Say that again? I absolutely can. And let me go back to that slide so you can see it. If there are clear rules in a household against drinking or drug use, teens are less likely to use. So a teen who thinks my parents would disapprove of this are more likely to not use, right? They're more likely to not use tobacco, alcohol, or cannabis if they think that their parents would disapprove of it. So again, you matter. As a parent, what you think matters. And, right, so thank you for having me repeat that because it's important. And just saying zero tolerance, we have a rule, and that's it, is not effective. Okay. It actually has to be a conversation. It has to be why we as a family believe this, why this is important to us. And young people say that there has to be space for a discussion. And also, parents, at the same time as saying, please don't use, that's not okay in our house, also acknowledging that use happens and still being able to plan for safety and support in the situation that it does. So I'm asking you to hold two things at the same time, and we can do it. And the research says we can do it, and it works, which is, honey, I care so much about your health and safety. And because of that, it's not okay with me if you're using substances I don't want you to be using. And honey, your health and safety is the most important thing to me. And if something should happen where you're uncomfortable with your own actions or anyone else's, you can call me and I'm here for you, right? And I'm here to pick you up. I'm here to take you home and make you a grilled cheese sandwich. We will talk about it tomorrow, but we're going to be okay. that both of those things at the same time are the best way to keep our kids safe. I will ask though that if there's anybody out there tonight, oh, you've already started it, who has any ideas. Thank you, Erik, for your comment on nicotine. I appreciate that. We call it tobacco because that's what the research called it. And then we have built language at a young age with our kids around house rules that they helped create, which have evolved into more mature rules and concepts. So this is a great example of how we can learn from ourselves. This is a family who started this idea of creating these house family rules together when they were younger. And as the kids have gotten older, those rules continue to evolve and iterate, and I'm sure touch on things like parties and substances. Absolutely. That is a wonderful, wonderful tip to share. I'm going to ask if anybody else has any tips or ideas they can share about the way they set rules or talk about rules with their kids that are working for them, that you also put that in the chat so that we can learn from each other as well. I know somebody who allows their kids to go to parties, but the rule is I drop you off and I pick you up. That's an iteration of a rule that one family has decided works for them, right? And there's, 100 in between. Thank you for sharing that built-in language around house rules. I might use that. Okay. So I already shared this with us, health and safety being that biggest priority, okay? Being able to hold, I have a rule and I'm here to support you. Okay. I'm going to move us along because I'm talking a little bit too much. Active parental monitoring. Okay. This is simply being in the know, knowing where your kids are, who they're with, but it's a balance. Your kids are autonomous human beings, right? And too much monitoring can betray some trust, but you have every right as a parent to know sort of where they are and when they're going somewhere else, right? If there's parents who have any ideas, things they've used around monitoring, please do put that in the chat. There's also a question from another parent. Okay. Role modeling, we matter, guys. We know that if we are modeling frequent, heavy, or coping related drinking, our kids are related to have earlier, more and more serious alcohol related harms later. So one of the things I know is a lot of parents who are checking coping related drinking in particular, and they're no longer saying, oh God, I've had a hard day as they reach for a glass of wine, right? Shifting the way we model. And of course, communication, which kids tell us a big part of communication they wish their parents would do is listen more than speak. Okay. Someone has mentioned calibrating curfews and having a cultural standard. I also like that. I think anytime you can get other folks on board with you and other parents, there is power to that. Ultimately, the answer to the second question of what you allow your kids to do or not do is going to vary for every family here. But no matter what you do, having that structure paired with support is really, really key. Final tips, if you are having your kids go to parties where you know substances are present, the knowledge to safe, right? They should know about fake pills. They should know about blood alcohol content. Teach them to be responsible bystanders. Teach them to be the kid who calls 911 and stays with a friend who's in trouble, okay? Knowing your kids' friends and their parents is invaluable. And part of this is what's happening in the chat, which is this idea around parents being on the same page. If you have parents on the same page, you are creating a new norm. It's not just the house party norm, a new norm, okay? And power in numbers is important. And have a safety plan, have a transportation plan if you are letting kids go. We're going to talk. I'm going to let you rest your brains on all the parenting research for a moment. I know that was a lot. I appreciate you sticking with me. But we are going to talk more about this issue of transportation, and we're going to learn more about laws that applies to our teen drivers overall in any situation. But remember, for us, it's through the lens of sort of house parties and partying in general. So I'm going to stop sharing. Lieutenant Egide, I'm going to turn this over to you, give you a moment to share. And I want to thank everybody for the chat participation so far so much. This is really the prize of the night. All right, Lieutenant.
Very good. Awesome. Thanks so much, Jackie, for having me. And it's very informative. As a parent myself, it was mentioned in my intro. I have a high schooler, a junior, a soon-to-be high schooler, an eighth grader, and really, it's a team effort in our house with these conversations about making good decisions and safe choices. My wife and I, and having that good communication with our kids has been really helpful. And from the CHP, the law enforcement side of it, I'm really happy to be here tonight because it's, we're trying to build the trust with the community, and we are a community partner. And really my purpose here tonight is to hopefully educate just on, teen driving, already a risky behavior. And then when we combine that with teen partying, just how risky it does become. And as somebody that grew up in Novato and was around when the social ordinance laws came about, I was only a couple of years out of high school, and knew several of the occupants of that vehicle. It's something that hits home, and again, just appreciate being able to talk a little bit about safety tonight. All right, I'm going to share my screen sharing here. So I'm going to start my slideshow. And so 5,000 is the number I'm saying here now. And, nationally, approximately 5,000 teens die in car crashes every year. And car crashes are the leading cause of death for teens. California is home to over 800,000 licensed teenage drivers. And thousands of state drivers between 15 and 19 years of age, they're involved in fatal and injury crashes every year. And the mission of the California Highway Patrol is to reduce death among teenagers caused by these crashes. And the reason I talk about crashes already being risky for teens, and so without alcohol, without drugs, without the teen partying landscape, just driving in general for teenagers is a highly risky activity. And so that's why it's so important that we're educating and talking to young people about driving, just how important it is, and the responsibility that they have when they're behind the wheel of a 4,000-pound vehicle. So I have some facts here just to share with the group. So zero tolerance for underage drinking. If you're under the age of 21 and you have any alcohol in your system, your license will be suspended for a minimum of a year if you're pulled over. That's any law enforcement agency. You're required to take a test, a preliminary alcohol screening test. So that's not the breath test. It's a version of it. It's a field sobriety test if you're under 21. And as we discussed already, DUI is more than just alcohol. You can be arrested for being under the influence of cannabis, and that includes the edibles and concentrates, prescription drugs, illegal drugs. We talk a lot about pills, over-the-counter drugs that impair your ability to drive. So anytime, right, we have the very risky teens already driving, and now we combine that with getting behind the vehicle, and it's, I can't say enough about how risky of a behavior it then becomes, and the responsibility that's why I appreciate being part of this, because not only educating about, hey, having a good structure and a good transportation plan, and knowing that stuff is going to happen again, right? I was a high schooler once, and now have high schoolers now, and so these are real conversations. And now also see the other side of it, where I go to these crashes involving young people, and it's a lot of, hey, this is never going to happen to us, and this doesn't happen in this neighborhood. But I can tell you, as a graduate of Santa Rosa High School, I can probably count over 10 people that I know that have passed in a car accident where alcohol or drugs was involved. And the data doesn't lie. It's very risky behavior just driving in general. And I don't have slides with crashes here. I just more want to just talk about, hey, let's be real about when we're having these conversations with our kids and how important it is to make those good decisions when you're getting behind the wheel, even when you're not at a party. And I also threw in here distracted driving. Sometimes the kids don't know about this one either, but anyone under 18 years old, you can't be on the phone when you're in the car. All the data is out there, the perception reaction, the distraction, the tiniest bit of taking your eyes off the road, traveling at 60 miles an hour can be a disaster for you, for if you're transporting anybody. And I'll talk a little bit about the repercussions of that as we get through the slides here. So on the alcohol related incidents, so all ages apply to our basic DUI laws. So we hear the 0.08 blood alcohol level, right? That's for people that are 21 or over. So that is a violation. Being impaired in driving is also another violation. So that includes, we don't have a test we have a blood test for pills and cannabis and that, but there's no chemical test like for alcohol. If you're over an 08, for a pill, you don't know if you're over an 08 for a pill, right? So we have field sobriety tests that are conducted to determine somebody's impairment when they're driving. And, especially from the CHP, we train law enforcement agencies throughout the state. We have highly trained people detecting this stuff. So if you're stopped by the police agency or highway patrol, more than likely they're gonna detect that something's going on. You can't drive under the influence of a drug. I talked about that, or a combined influence. And so let's get into our youth under the age of 21, alcohol-related incidents. So may not operate a vehicle. I talked about that, right, over a 0.01. So that's basically any alcohol in your system. And another law being you can't operate a motor vehicle. And these are more on the punitive side, these different laws and these different codes. So I don't want to dive too much into it. Just biggest understanding is any alcohol in your system under 21, any drugs that impair, it's against the law. I took some of these slides from our Start Smart program, which I have some info at the end about. It's a educational program that the Highway Patrol puts on, and it's for teens and parents and to learn more about safe driving practices. And I'll provide that information at the end. But sometimes it's fake news that DUI and cannabis is not a real thing. But if you're driving while high, we're gonna know our officers are trained in it. And really, under that guise of, hey, we want to keep the roads as safe as possible for everybody traveling on them. We're going to take the appropriate action, especially with young people. Pills with fentanyl, not knowing where pills are coming from, huge issue. And I would just say as a parent, and this is probably one of the ones that scares me the most, just because you have no idea what's out there, where's it coming from, different than 20 plus years ago when we were growing up, I think. And that's, I see some of the chats, and this stuff was going on when we were growing up too. And I think now, though, with the pills and the fentanyl, it is so important that you're having, and Jackie, you talked about those conversations starting early. We're talking about this stuff at the dinner table, and we're not doing scare stuff. It's not, I'm not CHP Erik when I get home. It's just, I'm just regular Erik, and having these conversations and having these same fears about, a kid taking a pill laced with fentanyl. So I'd say not only from the aspect of, never driving while taking the pill, even if it's pills you're prescribed where you had a injury in a sport, and you get your prescription. Do not drive a car if you're taking pills, even illegal pills. So that's fentanyl, a deadly dose, right there. I had a video, but I took the video out just because I think we're becoming pretty well educated in fentanyl and how dangerous it is. But that's a lethal dose of fentanyl right there. Our officers are out there taking it off the streets every day, and it's real, and we need to be concerned about it. I showed this slide, I don't want to, don't feel like you need to read this all slide. This is all the different common effects of when you take drugs. And I put it up there just because there's about 10 or 15 bullet points under every one of these drugs, which is going to show signs of what the behavior is when you take drugs and your altered behavior. So already a very risky thing, driving a car, right? We know it's the most dangerous thing a teen can do. And then say they're they've taken now a drug, and all these indicators and these things that happen to your body. Now you're in this altered state, and now you're trying to operate a motor vehicle, and just how scary that is. And now let's say we're all at a house party, and we talk about being able to control, and Jackie had in your slides, controlling, right, the environment. Okay. But I would say this: you can't control when somebody leaves your house. And that becomes, and we're talking a lot of kids, it's now the control is gone, and say now 6 kids pile into a vehicle, with a driver that's under 18 and is on a provisional driver's license. You shouldn't have anybody in their car. And now you have a highly risky, dangerous situation. So that's more the point of this slide. It's drugs do these things. Let's not kid ourselves, right? They alter your state, and that just makes the driving even more dangerous. So right, that's why I feel so happy to be here, because I'm part of the community and just want to help with this too. And I think just by you allowing me to talk a little bit about the dangers of driving, because hey, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to be that strict parent, but there's good stuff out there. There's the Good Samaritan law that we have, and not getting in trouble if you're victim bystanders liability protections for that. So Good Samaritan law, I encourage everybody to Google that. There is some immunity things there too. But I just thought good to bring up. If you see something, there's those laws that exist. A little bit about provisional driver's license. I want to talk about this because we do have a lot of young people. We're speaking to the high school kids. And so provisional driver's license, you get it if you're 18 years old or under. In the first 12 months of driving, you're not supposed to drive between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. And you're not supposed to transport passengers who are under the age of 20 years old. The exceptions to that are if you have a licensed driver that's your parent or guardian, or somebody that's 25 or older. And the purpose of this law was an understanding by the legislature to know driving is already a highly risky behavior for teenagers, and to avoid these mass casualty events. I mean, where, like I gave the example, you're rolling out of a party and now 5 of you get into a vehicle, and now we have a situation where multiple people can be affected. And that's what we're really trying to avoid there. And that just goes for not only being on the influence, but just regular driving in general. So kind of before I get to this slide too, just talking a little bit about the crash impact considerations, and kind of under the same thing of providing some helpful tips to talk about at home. And I go back to even when I was growing up, and my folks talking about, hey, you're a representative of your family also when you're out there, and these decisions, if you were to make a decision where you're going to get behind the wheel and you're under the influence and something were to happen, just the repercussions of that can happen from that. And that's real. And I see that, unfortunately, on my side. That's what I see a lot of. And again, it could just happen in your community every now and right every few years. It's not going to happen to us, but I see it in every community and in the multiple communities that I've worked in. And you get behind the wheel and you're under the influence and something happens and you're in a crash, not only the injury to yourself, but if you injure the occupants in your vehicle, and the criminal aspects that come along with that, and the civil liability, and how these incidents tear apart communities and families, and the devastating effects they have. Those are, I think, good, while they're scary conversations to have, but maybe just another tool in your toolbox saying, hey, you're part of this family, and with that, we need to trust in you that you are gonna take care of everybody under this roof, and you can do that by safely driving a vehicle. I think it's a worthy conversation to have with your teens, especially in that structured approach that you talked about, Jackie. I like that a lot. This having a plan, working as a team, it's a family unit, and because I'll tell you, one mistake, in less than a half a second can change the trajectory of your entire and family. And I've seen it many times with these accidents. So kind of with that, again, we're a resource. So being here is a resource, and hopefully provide some good information. But we have the Start Smarts program that's great. We've been doing it. We do it throughout the state, and it's teens and parents interactive safe driving awareness class. We have CHP has become moving into the technology realm, and we even have an app you can download through the App Store. You can contact our office, the Marin CHP office, and we can tell you when the next class is. And these are big classes. We have them down here in Corte Madera, and they're really good for young drivers, and helping in those ones. That's where you're going to see some more of the pictures and the car crashes and stuff. But they're led by a CHP officer and members of the community. And then we have our every 15 minutes programs for high schoolers also. And that's, if you've never seen one of those, or if a school is interested in, we'd love to. We've done them, especially when I was an officer here. We did them in probably every high school in Marin, and we're looking to get back. And it takes it all the way from, it's real, because from the crash to the jail portion of it to the legal system portion of it. So it's very educational for young people. Talks about the consequences. That's the end of my slides, Jackie.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lieutenant. We usually wait until the end on questions, but I do have one question that's coming up a bit, and I'm wondering if you're able to answer it. And the question is generally around consequences for kids who get caught underage use, but in particular, can young people either have a license revoked or delayed if they are drinking or using underage, but not in a car? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If they're using underage at a party, for example, is one of the potential consequences related at all to them getting or maintaining a license?
Not
Or
that
not?
I've heard.
Okay.
Not usually. We are getting people when they're driving.
Okay.
But that's a good question. That would be more for a district attorney's office.
Okay.
I'll take note of it for sure. But
I
yeah,
was going to say, I'm happy to follow up with the DA. Yeah.
and I've never,
Okay.
I personally have not heard of a license being affected because of a house party. That'd be because the license is more of a DMV function, right? It's a privilege that the DMV, right? You go and get it, and that's where those laws kind of come through with the suspensions, and that's a function of the DMV that we alert them to. But
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and just a really solid source of information for us. And I learned some things I didn't know as well. Um, we are going to turn this over now to what, for many of us, is the best part of the night, which is the youth voice. And tonight we have Ada with us. Ada's going to share more about what she's seen, what she knows, her perspective. Um, and I'm going to just turn this right over to you, Ada. We're so thrilled and honored to have you with us.
Thank you so much. And hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Ada Pearlson, and I'm currently a senior at Tamalpais High School. I'm also a student ambassador for Raising the Bar and a proud member of the Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships Board. Last summer, I was lucky enough to be the lead of the Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships summer internship, where I led a fantastic group of interns in various projects to spread awareness about our programs and to promote healthy teen lives. I've also worked with my Raising the Bar program coordinator, Lisa, to bring the conversation about parent modeling to PTA boards and Mill Valley schools, including Park School, Tam Valley, Edna, Old Mill, and Mill Valley Middle. But today I want to talk about what I see and hear when it comes to social host ordinances and teen partying landscapes. When I started preparing for this presentation, I actually decided to ask around about the social host ordinance, and honestly, the responses were quite surprising. I talked to about a dozen students, and not a single one of them knew what it was. Most had never even heard the term before. After I explained it, many people were surprised. Some asked if parents really could get fined or if it was just a myth. This small survey showed me how little awareness there is among students about the legal side of hosting. On the flip side, I've heard from some parents who do know about the ordinance, and they're scared of it. Many say they're afraid to host because of the risk of fines or even lawsuits if something goes wrong. It seemed as though parents were more scared of fines than their kids using substances. Many parents also think that allowing this behavior at their homes will ensure that their kids will be safe, which is a common false hope. So, there's this disconnect in knowledge about the ordinance. What gets lost in the middle is the opportunity for safe spaces where teens can hang out without worries. If we had more open communication about the ordinance, what it means, why it exists, and how families can navigate it, I think both sides could feel more confident. Teens would understand the consequences, and parents could host with clearer boundaries instead of fear. And to switch over to hosting fun and safe events, I thought I would talk about my experience. I find that a lot of parents are worried about their house not being fun and therefore feel pressured to host their kids and friends to drink at their own house. I have my friends over all the time for simple, fun hangouts, watch movies, make dinner together, get ready for events, to swim, and so much more. We provide good food and snacks, and my friends will never doubt a good time here. Now, I would like to switch over to one of the more prominent and dangerous issues of the teen partying landscape: driving under the influence. I wish I could say it's rare, but the truth is it's happening a lot. I've heard more stories than I want to admit about teens driving after drinking, and what's even worse is how casually it's talked about. It's not always someone saying, "I'm drunk driving." It's comments like, "I'm fine," or "it was just one drink." That kind of language downplays something incredibly dangerous. Some think that just because they've gotten away with it, they won't ever get caught. More and more teens driving under the influence, and this sadly influences others into thinking that it's okay. Just because you did it once doesn't mean that you will be safe the next time, or at all. A lot of teens think that they are being responsible if they've only had a little to drink or are only driving a short distance. Some think it is responsible because they are in charge of driving their friends home too, and don't want to leave them. But impairment doesn't care about distance or confidence. It only takes one bad judgment call to change everything. Some kids feel as though the biggest risk from drunk driving is getting caught, or in trouble with the police instead of getting hurt. Taking back roads is just as dangerous as the normal ones. Additionally, many of these choices come from not having a plan. When people go out without thinking about how they're getting home, it becomes easy to make impulsive decisions in the moment. We always hear adults talk about drinking and driving like it's a thing in the past, but for teens right now, it's still a very real and very current problem. Teens driving under the influence happens much more than you might think. Parents need to check in on their teens about this issue. You probably do not know that your kid is doing it. I've seen some of my friends be the designated driver, and that's great. But it only works if everyone actually sticks to the plan. Apps like Uber or having a parent to pick you up should never feel embarrassing. The real embarrassment is pretending to be fine and putting yourself and others in danger. Some kids simply do not want to spend money on an Uber to go home or think that it's too much effort. More and more teens are open and willing to drive drunk regardless if their friends are in the car or not. At the end of the day, drinking and driving isn't just a bad choice, it's a deadly one. And we as teens have to stop treating it like it's normal, because it's not. Many teens who do not plan on drinking in the first place end up being pressured into it. It is not easy to say no. Many designated drivers fall victim to this and end up driving their friends while impaired back home. There have been countless accidents regarding teen drunk driving and substance use in recent years. Awareness needs to be spread about these dangers. We do not normalize it. Parents need to check in on their teens about this topic because, as I said before, you probably do not know that your kid is really doing it. It is okay to host fun and safe events at home to check in with your teen about these topics. Thank you so much for listening and feel free to ask any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ada. And we will definitely have some Q&A soon. I want to pull out two things before we move on to our final speaker and then get to Q&A. One is when you talked about sort of the fun events in your home and you mentioned food and snacks. I know I'm not the only one who is smiling. I saw it in the chat too. There's something so simple and so true that if you provide the snacks, the teens will come. Just like that basic level of nurture and that basic level of care that we might give to an 8-year-old that we're still going to give to a 17-year-old. And knowing that that happens in your home and knowing that you and your friends are cooking dinners together is really wonderful to hear. I also want to pull out both from what you said, and then I've been seeing in the chat a lot around provisional licenses, right? Or like under 18 and like other kids being driven by those drivers and then substances in the situation. And while I don't have an answer to that, I in my mind, this is sort of similar to hosting house parties, right? Like we can set boundaries here. We can say to our kid who's not allowed to drive other young people yet, no. And we can say to our kid who wants to be driven by somebody else, no. And I know they're not always listening to the no, please. I know, absolutely. But all the research we have is telling us that when we say it, when we express that this is the rule, it does make a difference. It does happen. And so just want to pull out some of these bigger concepts that are coming through. But Ada, I know you have some family members on the phone tonight on the call, and I know they're proud of you for sort of who you've become and what you're advocating for. So thank you. I am going to, even though I say Q&A at the end, Q&A at the end, I'm going to let this one slip in here because I think it's an interesting one. Ada, have you ever had to tell friends, or do you tell your friends that they can't bring substances into your home?
That's funny. I was just writing a response, but
Oh,
I never,
please.
no, I've never had to tell anyone. I think it's because the way if I'm inviting my friends over, I'm more phrasing it as a hangout, and I feel like my friends don't really associate substances with that. Um,
Okay.
but I think some other, I know that some other kids do. So, but I've never had to say that. I think
Okay.
a lot of
Okay.
my friends would think of it as like if you're going to a party, that's what.
So it's different. It's framed
Yeah.
differently. All right. Awesome, Ada. Thank you. Okay, guys, we are going to close out our night tonight. We want to leave you with more tools. We want to leave you with more resources. We want you to feel like you can talk to your kids about this and you can talk to other adults about this. And so I'm really thrilled that my wonderful colleague, Amanda, and coordinator of the Be the Influence program is here to let you know how you can get more support.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, everyone. It's been so great to listen. It's fun, even though we work on all of these presentations together. I'm always learning a lot, and from Erik too. And I always love hearing from Ada. So thanks, you guys. Yep, I am Amanda Sharon. I'm the program coordinator for Be the Influence, or BTI. I'm also a mom here in Marin. I have an 11-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old son. And I'm really excited to be here with you guys tonight to go over some tools we've developed. So let's see, the first thing is just a little bit of background on BTI. So like Let's Talk, BTI is a program of Marin Healthy Youth Partnerships, and it was really designed specifically to help parents navigate exactly what we're talking about tonight, which is reducing social access to substances. Next slide, please. Thank you for controlling my slides, Jackie. As Jackie touched on throughout the presentation, our focus is really on care over control. As parents of teens, it's easy to feel like we have no control. And to some extent, it's true that our kids are growing more independent by the day. But even as they grow, they are looking to us for guidance. And the research is clear that our kids care what we think. And Jackie mentioned this too, but kids consistently rate their parents among the primary reasons they choose not to use substances, specifically perceived parent disapproval. If they think that you don't want them to do it, they're far less likely to do it. So our goal is really not to control them. Our goal is to care for them in a way that helps guide them to safer choices. And our BTI toolkit was designed to help you. So we're just going to kind of quickly go over this. I know we don't have a ton of time, but go ahead. Next slide. So the main resources that I just wanted to share with you guys are our Mythbusters and scripts, our research page, the BTI party guide, and our guide to talking with your teens. Each slide is going to have a QR code that leads to the page. So if you'd like to follow along or learn more, please go ahead. So first we'll look at Mythbusters and scripts. This is my favorite page. It feels like if you're going to go to one, this is the one. It kind of pulls everything we talk about. But this is a resource that really felt in demand as we talked to the community and realized there are a lot of misconceptions around allowing in-home use. In this section, you'll find a series of common myths. You can click into each myth. It'll reveal the research that debunks it, along with a suggested script. So you can use these if that topic ever comes up in conversation, or if you want to breach that conversation with another parent or your kid. There's also a section with conversation starters that are based kind of on how well you know the person. Partially, we developed this because I was in a position where I felt like, oh my gosh, I really want to share this, and I don't know what the first words are to get this conversation going. And we all work together to create those. And it's pretty helpful to have like just a little text on hand if your kid's going somewhere or you just want to build community around this and talk a little more about it. So all of the talking points are designed to help parents connect with one another, discuss the topics in a really like kind, conversational, fact-based way, making it easier to set clear expectations and support one another in keeping kids safe. Thank you. And next is our research page. And this just gives parents and caregivers, they could use it to see the research that underlies our program. Each of the studies cited includes a little audio clip that breaks down the research in simple terms, as well as a link to the full study. So however you want to consume that, it is available to you. And next we have talking with your teen. So talking with your teen about substances can feel like one of the hardest pieces of this process. But when we lead with love and care, it's much easier to wrap our heads around. Jackie touched on this too, that it's not as much zero tolerance, just say no, and a lot more, oh, I care about you so much. Let's get into this together. Let's talk about it. We don't need all of the answers or information in order to let our kids know how much we love them and that we hope they'll make safe choices. That being said, our Let's Talk program has so many resources as well for all of the information about all of the substances, and we'll link that in the chat for you guys too, if you do want some background info. And if you haven't done or said these things to your teens, or maybe even you've said some things you wish you hadn't, that's okay. You're now armed with more information. It's okay to come to them and say, wow, I really didn't know how much you were up against when it came to substances. I'm sorry if I ever gave you the impression that it wasn't a big deal. I'm here to talk to you and help you figure it out. Anything that comes your way. And have the BTI party guide. This is for anyone who's planning to throw a party. And it gives you some ideas about how to throw safe and fun gatherings, although I loved Ada's ideas. And yeah, snacks are obviously key. Add snacks to the list. But yeah, we talked about how to host a party, establishing some ground rules, and also some things to consider before allowing your kids to attend other people's parties. And our conversation guides are helpful too if you ever can reach out to those parents. And finally, if this resonates with you and you'd like for all of these resources to land in your inbox, please take the BTI pledge. The ask is really simple. Never provide substances to minors, do not allow underage substance use in your home, and actively supervise teen gatherings. When you take the pledge, you'll receive a series of emails and tips directly to your inbox. And to learn more, you could go to btimarin.org. And also, please follow us on Instagram. We put all of the best information on Instagram. I will drop that link into the chat as well. That was quick.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so, so much. Our hope is that gives you all some more tangible tools that you can walk away with. I am going to open this up for Q&A in a moment. I want to acknowledge that I'm seeing two major themes in the chat. One is about consequences, and there's some very detailed questions about consequences. Some of those, if they're related to driving, Lieutenant Egide might know the answer to. Others, we're going to have to sort of look in. I see people have put some websites that can help folks find those answers. We are not legal experts, nor are we experts on the ways in which the law is being enforced. So if it's not related to driving, we're going to have to do some independent research on that one. The other theme I'm seeing is parents asking each other for advice. What time is your curfew, right? What do you do in your house if? And I love that. I think that is the main reason why we do these discussions. And I think it's important that we're all thinking about how do we actually create forums to really have those conversations beyond chat on our Let's Talk discussions. Like, what are the other ways we can do this? What are the other ways you can connect with parents? What are the other ways you can get your school to bring parents together? Because it's clearly really valuable. So we're going to open this up. I'm going to start. Lisa, I see your hand. Let's start with you. You can go ahead and unmute.
Hi. Hi, I'm hoping that Officer Erik is still on the line because I do have a question about the police presence. I heard about a gathering of teens in San Anselmo this past weekend where the cops showed up and everyone scattered, and then the cops caught up with them at Red Hill where they had scattered too and said, "We're not going to get you in trouble. We just want you to be safe." And it seems like a very pleasant message, but it also seemed a little bit odd coming from law enforcement when the teens were clearly using substances. And so I thought it was sort of an interesting case that I'd love to hear the officer. CHP, I guess, is different from Central Marin Police, but what are the priorities in terms of interacting with kids around substances, not with regards to driving, but the legality and safety issues?
Certainly. So house parties, you're right. That's going to be handled by probably the sheriff's department or the local police departments. But I would say, there's not going to be much tolerance for underage substance use or an officer condoning that behavior, especially, if it's just you can't take the risk and allow somebody that's possibly under the influence to enter in an unsafe situation. So I'd say you're right. What you heard probably, and again, not being there, to provide really a lot of context behind the incident that happened. But in terms of making a situation safe is always going to be our number one goal, and how we accomplish that, we can do that in a lot of ways. Right? There's tickets and calling parents and arranging for rides. But does that kind of help answer the question? We're not going to skate around kind of the law side of it though, when you do deal with us.
I guess, I mean, maybe Central Marin Police is just different. I was just surprised that there seemed to be no legal repercussions. There was a sort of tacit acceptance on the part of the officers, and it seemed strange. So I was genuinely curious about that, why that was the approach rather than the more sort of familiar approach of police coming to give you a ticket or a fine or call your parents, etc.
Thanks, Lisa. Other questions, feel free to go ahead and just unmute. I can see Lisa because she's on the first page, but I'm not going to see your emoji hand if you're on another page. So feel free to mute, or feel free to ask in the chat. There's been a couple of questions around parties in open spaces. We don't have folks with us tonight who are able to talk about parties on sort of public land and what those rules or repercussions are. So I can't speak to any sort of enforcement or city county-wide ordinances on that. For that, we kind of only can go back to sort of how we're talking about party attendance and behaviors with our own kids. I'm sorry, I don't have more for you on parties and open spaces. Give it a moment, and then I received a question from somebody, but I received personally a question for Ada. Ada, this person asked, did your family or parents do anything to help form your outlook on substances? So is there anything you can think of in your life, your family, your parental relationship that sort of supported you to want to pursue this kind of work and outlook?
Yeah, well, my parents it was never like, they just wanted me to be safe, so it wasn't anything extremely strict or like there were never like consequences, really. They just would tell me what my personal consequences would be if I did this, to like more about myself and my health and not really consequences at home. And especially with underage drinking and driving, especially. Um, and it was never anything super strict, just I want to be here for you. This is what would happen if you do this, and it's not normal and it's illegal for a reason, pretty much.
Okay, so that's awesome. If I could lift a few things out of that, it sounds like you guys had a lot of conversations about the personal impact to you of your decisions. Sounds like they were pretty supportive and loving. And I picked up, I think you said, like, this is not normal and it's illegal, right? And so not everybody is doing it. It's not the norm, right? This is that I think that's what they mean by it's not normal. Like, this isn't okay because everybody's doing it and it's a rite of passage. And we actually know that that's a really important message to give our kids, and for us to understand ourselves. So thank you, Ada. I did not prepare you with that answer at all, but I really loved it. So thank you. Thank you to your parents. Other questions either in the chat or by coming off of mute for any of our speakers, or else I think you've been asking some questions of each other, which has been helpful. Amy, I see you. Amy.
Hi, good night, or
Hi.
good evening. Backing up on Lisa, I picked up my team from a party at an open space in San Anselmo Saturday night, and I hear these kids in the bags just saying, "Oh, cops showed up, but they're okay with us being there. However, they just let us know as long as we pick up after ourselves, it's okay."
Thank you, Amy. So I think this is kind of echoing a concern that we've heard tonight, that our law enforcement isn't doing necessarily what we might always want or hope. And again, I don't know that we have a response to that, or that they're then something that we can hold and maybe share with some of the law enforcement that we connect with, Kelsey, through MHIP, that this is something we're hearing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing it.
I heard the same message, so that it's clearly a
Okay.
credible story, and because I don't know any of the other two moms, so I
Okay.
heard the same exact message. So that is concerning that, yeah, maybe we need some conversations with local PD. That would mean a lot to us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Maggie. That is so noted. Thank you all. Um, okay, I think we have a couple other hands raised. MM.
Hey guys, first and foremost, I just want to say so grateful for these conversations, and I'm grateful for everybody that's leaned in and really helped build this narrative in Marin County. I was a high school kid in Southern California. I don't know if you guys remember, but the Nancy Reagan drug abuses life abuse program. I was an ambassador like Ada back then, so it kind of brings me back memories to that. So I appreciate that there's youth that's part of the community and kind of part of the fabric of helping to bring this kind of awesome change. You know, my question is, and I'm gonna go through those BTI tools, but I'm not so much worried about the parents that are on this call. It's the parents that are not on this call, that are not leading in, not being part of the community, not part of the law enforcement community, building these bridges and building these partnerships with police officers and all these different agencies that are here to help us and kind of create this web of safety. Is I would love to see if there's any types of tools, some things that we can create these bridges of understanding, and I loved your point about there's no shame in this. There's no wrong or right. Parents were raised a certain way, and then they thought they just did to carry that in, or there's different circumstances like you've kind of called out. My ask is, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about this. I've got a 17-year-old and I've got a 14-year-old, so I'm in it just like most everybody else. Um, is there any outlets or is there any other from a programmatic standpoint that we can tap into as these 100 or 200 parents that can be another bridge and an outreach to those parents that may need just a little bit of a nudge to kind of bring them into this circle here and to make this next time, this conversation a year from now, maybe 400 parents strong. So
Mhm.
is there any best practices or any tools or links or guidance that we can
Yeah.
use as parents?
Great. So first of all, I love what you've just shared. And I want to say that it's going to give me pause and our whole team thinking beyond this call about how we do that, because that is the question. And I don't know that we have a straight up answer, but I want to start. You mentioned you were going to go to the BTI tools. I want to start by letting you know that some of those scripts in there are designed for you to talk with other parents. And some of what this takes is a bit of discomfort for the folks who are on this call, quite honestly, to be able to have that conversation with somebody they know who isn't the parent in this room, to utilize those scripts, to share that research and to start there. And Amanda's just popped that right there in the chat. But I too, at tonight, have been thinking about how do we take like a community like this and sort of like expand it. And so we're going to keep thinking about it. But the first step is get familiar with what you want to communicate, use the scripts, take a look at that pledge, and see if we can spread this beyond this room. Amanda, did you have something else to share about that?
I was just going to just mention it's in the chat now, but we have developed a parent ambassador program in addition to our youth ambassador program. And so we would love for you to join. We would love
Oh,
to bring more
MM,
people.
join the parent ambassadors.
Yeah, and it's a new program, and we
Amanda.
yes, are just very excited to
Amanda,
have people want to be involved.
do you want to put your email address in the chat for any parents here who might be interested? And then we're looking at you in being a parent ambassador. Maybe it's a great question, because yes, we need to bring those folks in because this is about a norm, right? It's about really changing a culture that our kids are growing up in. Okay, I am really conscious of the time. I'm also really conscious that there's so much more discussion and chatting, and I think we'll keep thinking about ways to bring folks together for that. But I want to thank you for being the parents who chose to come tonight, to MM's point, that you are in this room, that I think at one point we were 215 strong, and that is really impactful. That's one of our largest community discussions. So there's a lot of you who showed up because you really care about this. Our next community discussion if you'd like to join us, is on December 3rd. We're talking about the adolescent brain, building some more empathy for our young people around us. You can register for that on our website. So I want to thank you. I know we weren't able to answer all questions tonight, but thank you for being here. Thank you to our guests, Lieutenant, Ada, and this whole village, this whole community. You are a village, you are shifting the norm, and that's where some of this starts. So thank you very much, and good night all. Take care.